Hey 24K family, with the conclusion of the federal criminal case against Sean Diddy Combs and all the opinions of others on this case, I decided to express some of the observations that I had from the whole trial. First of all, when we first heard about that he was criminally investigated and all the things, and they were raiding his houses and all this stuff, we heard about secret dungeons, drug-laced baby oil, serial numbers scratched off of guns found at his house, and inappropriate interactions with minors, and so on and so forth. A lot of these things, and all of these things I just mentioned, none of this played out in the actual court case against Sean Diddy Combs, which I find interesting, since scratching off serial numbers or having scratched off serial numbers on guns in your possession is a federal crime. But yet there was not a charge for that in the official charges. Nor will we know that having inappropriate interactions with minors is a very serious charge, but there was no charge of him having inappropriate relations with any minors. So the official charges against Sean Diddy Combs was racketeering, which is running a criminal enterprise, sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura, known as Cassie, transportation to engage in prostitution of Cassie, sex trafficking of another alleged victim that went by the pseudonym of Jane Doe, transportation to engage in prostitution of one Jane Doe. So those are the 5 charges that were leveled against Sean Diddy Combs. No having possession of scratched out serial numbers of guns. No having inappropriate relations with any minors. None of that. Which are crimes, which are big crimes, which are crimes in themselves, but no charges of those whatsoever. But anyway, we get into the trial itself. And as you all probably already know, Sean Diddy Combs was found guilty of 2 of the counts. The transportation to engage in prostitution of Cassie and of Jane Doe. Those are the 2 counts he was found guilty of. The other 3 counts he was found not guilty of. And I know a lot of people, one of the biggest mistakes I think that the prosecution made in this case, and I think they had to, because I think, in my opinion, their case was weak of the charge that they were charging them with. But one of the biggest mistakes I feel the prosecution made was to show the 2016 beatdown of P. Diddy put on Cassie in that hotel lobby. Now, it was horrific. There's no justification for P. Diddy putting his hands on Cassie like that, or dragging, or anything. It was very horrific. I must admit, it was very horrific. But they couldn't charge for that because that was out of the statute of limitations. What I'm wondering is, why was it ever allowed in this trial in the first place? I know they tried to tie that video up to a freak-off, or what would happen to Cassie if she denied having a freak-off. So it's kind of forcing her. So they were kind of attempting to tie it up to show that it was forced upon her to participate in these freak-offs. I understand, I get it. But the video itself it was not proven that we heard rumors that it was part of a freak-off, or that the beatdown was triggered by her refusing to participate in the freak-off, but we don't know that for sure. We heard rumors of other things. We heard rumors of scratched off serial numbers on guns in his possession. We heard of him having inappropriate relations with minors that never came to fruition. So we can hear rumors, we can hear one thing, but the truth could be another thing. That's all I'm saying. So none of us know what triggered that horrific beat down in that hallway. So I don't think, in my opinion, that video should not have been allowed in this trial, because there was no charge of domestic violence in this trial, and there was no charge related to that beat down in that hallway. So that right there, allowing that showed that the judge had a bias right off the bat, in my opinion. But another thing is, when Diddy's lawyers put in, once he was charged, when Diddy's lawyers put in for bail on several occasions and he was denied by the judge, to me that showed the judge's bias as well. He's only charged. You've had people charged for mass murders, unaliving people, and they've been given bail, and you're telling me that this man can't get bail? So that showed a little bias from the judge to me, but that's just my opinion. But anyway, let's get into the trial. Like I said, he was found guilty of the two lesser charges. Transportation to engage in prostitution charges. And each one of those counts carry up to a 10-year sentence, from time served to a 10-year sentence. So, yeah, each one of those counts. After he was, well, let me go back to the 2016 beat down video, which, like I said, I again repeat, there's no justification for Diddy laying that beat down on Cassie in that hallway. Nothing justifies that. But the only reason the prosecution had that video and wanted that video in was to emotionally trigger the jury so that they would overlook the lack of evidence they actually had to convict Sean Diddy Combs, in my opinion. So it was like to emotionally trigger them, so their lack of factual evidence they could overlook that and just convict him on the being emotionally triggered. That's what they were anticipating. That's what, in my opinion, the federal prosecutors were looking to happen. Fortunately, the jury was smart enough to see through that, and we gotta applaud them on that. Now, after he was found not guilty on 3 of the counts, a lot of people felt that Sean Diddy Combs would get bail. He would be able to get bail. And of course, his lawyers put in for a bail again after the verdicts came in. I, for one, didn't think that he was. I was not shocked when he was denied bail after the convictions, because let's be real here. He wasn't convicted of the major things in this indictment, but he was convicted of 2 counts: transportation to engage in prostitution, which hold sentences that can go up to 10 years on each count. So with that, he is convicted on some. He was found guilty on some things. So yeah, so I wasn't surprised that he was denied bail after the convictions. I was not surprised at one bit. Now, he has a sentencing coming up of those on those 2 counts in October of 2025. I don't believe that he will get any harsh prison time on those counts. I mean, he doesn't have a lengthy criminal record, so I don't believe that, and there's no set minimum time they can get. Like I said, the max time on each count is 10 years. I don't think he's going to get nowhere near 10 years prison time with both counts added together, but that's just my opinion. But it was a couple of takeaways that I have from this trial. Big takeaways. One big takeaways I want to leave you with this whole trial. First of all, Cassie was not a victim. Yes, she was a victim of the hotel beatdown in 2016, but I mean a victim of a sex slave type victim, as they tried to paint her, or this innocent sex slave of Diddy that the media tried to paint her as, this loving, darling sex slave of Diddy, and she was so afraid of him. She was so afraid of him that she cheated on him with Kid Cudi and her current husband when she was in a relationship with P. Diddy. But we're not gonna go in that. We're not gonna go down that slope. So she was that scared to do that. No, I believe that Cassie, even in her testimony, she proved that she was a willing and active participant in the freakoffs. So Cassie was not a victim in my opinion, and that's I think that was one of the flaws of the prosecution's case. But like I said, the prosecution, I believe, had a weak case to begin with, so they had to grab on anything they had. To try to paint Cassie as this innocent victim was a mistake. But then again, like I said, that prosecution had to do whatever they had to do because they had a weak case to begin with. But and it's interesting with Cassie and Jane, to a lesser degree, Jane Doe, the other alleged victim. See, Cassie, she got immunity as well as Jane Doe, the other alleged victim, and you know, yeah. So they had granted immunity from the government. Now, Cassie in particular was, if you want to convict or try to convict Sean Diddy Combs of running a criminal enterprise as the federal government tried to do, Cassie is not only a willing participant, she's an active participant in a criminal enterprise. That's why she was granted immunity. So we got an interesting case here where the alleged victim, Cassie, is not only the alleged victim, she can technically be charged with being a co-conspirator of a criminal enterprise, a co-participant in the criminal enterprise. That's why she was granted immunity. So this is interesting right here. This is very interesting. And we must remember, Cassie was with Diddy for over 10 years. So we got like 10 years of freak-offs here. Come on. So, so she had to be a willing participant. I'm sorry, there's no other way. That doesn't make sense. She had to be a willing participant, in my opinion. But that's one mistake that I believe, big mistake that the prosecution made, and I believe they had to make it, of course. That they was backed in the corner and they had a weak case. The other huge mistake the prosecution made that I feel that they had to make as well was showing that 2016 beatdown video in the hallway over and over and over and over and over and over again to the jury. Because after you keep showing it and keep highlighting it, it desensitizes. It has the effect of desensitizing that jury. So really, they did the defense a favor by keep showing it and showing it and showing it in an attempt to emotionally trigger that jury to make the emotional decision not based on the factual evidence, in my opinion. That's why they did it, but it backfired on them big time. First of all, that 2016 video or that beatdown was not a part of this case. It did not have a place in this case. That's the first and foremost thing. So it was like a blatant attempt to emotionally trigger the jury. And I haven't heard from many of the jurors that came out, but I would be interested to know what they thought about them kept on showing this 2016 video, because you feel like that the prosecution, I would feel like if I was on the jury, I would feel like the prosecution is trying to dumb me down. They don't want to show me factual evidence. They want to emotionally trigger me so I can just forego the lack of factual evidence and just convict on every charge and all this. So that's the way I look at it. So that, in my opinion, was the other big flaw of their case. But like I said, both of these flaws, making Cassie, painting Cassie out as this innocent victim and playing the 2016 beatdown tape over and over again to the jury, they had to do, in my opinion, because their case otherwise it crumbles to basically nothing, really. I mean, they really didn't have nothing beyond that. It was a weak case. And I believe that those two charges that Sean Diddy Combs was convicted of, the transportation charges to engage in prostitution, I believe that his lawyers are going to fight on appeal to get those dismissed. Because one thing is, how can I be convicted, or or Sean Diddy, or a person, or Sean Diddy Combs be convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution with Cassie or Jane Doe, when Cassie or Jane Doe don't identify themselves as prostitutes? So I mean, there has to be a prostitute to be convicted of transporting a person to engage in prostitution. Somebody has to be the prostitute. So, and the charges was transportation to engage in prostitution of Cassie, transportation to engage in prostitution with Jane Doe. So it was specific to those two young ladies. So those two young ladies would have to be participants as far as prostitution, be the prostitutes, so to speak. And prostitution is illegal in all U.S. states except a couple of places in the state of Nevada. So yeah, so it's really, it's really a murky case. I would love to know you all's opinion on this case, and the fallout from this case, and leave your comments below in the comment section. If you like, get your opinion, and you might have a different opinion, or you might add something else, just add it to the comments below. I really appreciate checking it out. With that, I'm gonna end the video right here. Please feel free to like, share, and comment on this video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. After subscribing, please click that little notification bell in order to be notified of any new uploads from this channel. I thank you all for your support. I truly appreciate it. I'm out on this one. Hopefully, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace! One love. Stay safe. Continue to be blessed.